Story 1. I saw a fox chasing a turkey on a hot summer day. They both grew tired, stopped running at the same time, and lay down to rest. After about a minute, they got up and continued the chase. It was cartoon nonsense, and I swear it happened, although I might not have believed it myself. Story 2. When I was 13 in 2008, my grandfather hung himself. He was a stoic old man who lived in rural Ireland. My family lived in the suburbs outside of Boston, Massachusetts. My mother was in pieces. She went to Ireland for the funeral, and when she came home, she cried herself to sleep every night. One night, I was up late getting a snack from the kitchen. I took it back to my bedroom and saw him. My grandfather, just as I remembered, was slowly ambling up the stairs. I stood in silent disbelief. I have seen what people would call ghosts, but the human mind is a strange thing, and I am not less prone to hallucinations than anyone else. The next morning, I sat down with my mother for breakfast. She was quiet and then said, "You know, I have been crying myself to sleep since I came back from Ireland. Last night I was crying and I felt the sheets get tucked in behind me just like my father did when I was a little girl. I reached behind me but felt nothing. Your father was not home yet, so it was not him. Then I fell into the most peaceful sleep I have had in ages." Her bedroom was at the very top of the stairs. I was not sure whether to tell her that I had seen her father the night before. I did not know how it might affect her, so I kept it to myself until years later when she retold the story. When she heard my side, she was not surprised. She said, "I believe you. You would not believe the things I have seen." Story 3. I saw a lion at my parents' house when I was a kid. My older brother saw it too. A lion went missing from a zoo in Ohio around that time and was never found. My brother and I swore we had seen it, but we had no proof. That winter, my parents found giant paw prints outside that were definitely not from a dog, cat, coyote, or other animals. Years later, when I was a freshman in high school, a friend's mother was driving me home and said she saw a lion run across the road where my parents live. She did not know about our earlier sighting. She was so convinced that she immediately called the police. That was all the proof I needed to know. I had not imagined what I saw as a child. Note: my brother and I saw the lion around 2004 to 2006, prior to the 2011 Zanesville, Ohio incident. The sighting by my friend's mother was around 2012. Story 4. I was sitting at the campsite when a beaver walked out of the lake on its hind legs, strolled through the site, and disappeared into the woods as if heading to Pooh's house. Story 5. I was living in Japan in a city called Miyazaki. I was watching television around the Christmas season. The station was Miyazaki Broadcasting. It was about 10 o'clock in the evening. There was a station identification break that ended with a full-screen message in large type in English. "Merry Christmas. Fuck you." This happened in 1993. Story 6. When I was a little girl, I had a dream in which I lived an entire life. The dream felt like a lifetime. I grew up, got married, had children, grew old with my husband, and died. I still remember the peace of dying and thinking how happy and lucky I was for the blessed life I had lived. As my husband and I get older, he starts to look and feel more like the man I grew old beside in my dream. I woke up crying right after I died. I couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. Story 7. When I was a kid, I told my parents about a corpse in a ditch by the side of the road as we drove past. They were angry with me for having such a morbid imagination. Story 8. I was doing laundry. When I opened the washer to take out the clothes, a live grasshopper flew out and hit me in the chest. It scared me because it was so unexpected. The grasshopper must have gotten into the laundry, survived the entire wash cycle, and still had enough life to jump out. I threw it back outside. I joke that it is immortal. It is probably still out there somewhere. Story 9. Nirvana performed in concert in a gym in Bellingham, Washington, in 1992. Story 10. An ape-like creature ran out of a house, shook its rear, then ran back inside through the closed door without opening it. I was about 13 and my 12-year-old cousin was with me. We still talk about it. We saw the exact same thing. I am 32 and he is 31. Story 11. When I was little, I was in bed between my parents one night. They were sleeping, but I was awake in the dark. I saw the apparition of a young boy about 6 years old climbing onto the nightstand. I remember vividly that he wore a white and red basketball jersey and had a dark brown bowl cut. A few years later, on the first day of fourth grade, a new student came into the classroom and took my breath away. He looked exactly like the boy I had seen that night. Story 12. I swear I saw a man walk backwards up a hill and disappear. He went out of my line of sight as he walked behind a tree and never came out the other side. I checked the tree. It scared the crap out of me. Story 13. An ocelot behind a dumpster and a zebra running in a ditch on Interstate 40, both in North Carolina. Story 14. A comet or something exploded into a giant green fireball when I was a kid. I did not expect a throwaway comment before class to get this much attention. Seems like a lot of us have seen bolides or aliens. Story 15. I know I saw a zebra grazing in a pasture while visiting colleges in north-central Ohio. That was about 15 years ago. Story 16. I went on my honeymoon at the Sandals Grande in St. Lucia. One day I went diving using a self-contained underwater breathing apparatus from the resort's beginner course. So I did not go deeper than 30 to 50 feet. I was alone with an instructor in shallow water and did not bring a camera on that dive. I swear I saw a full office-sized laser printer on the ocean floor, with pieces scattered everywhere, but I have no proof. Story 17. I remember being born. I was formless, standing in a long line waiting to be ushered through a crack in space and reality. After walking through, it was pitch black, and I could hear and feel rushing water all around me. Then I became myself. I saw shadow people and black smoke cloud entities when I was a child. Story 18. My friend and I were lying on a piece of playground equipment after a night of drinking when we both asked what that was. A light in the sky, about twice as bright as the surrounding stars, had been stationary and unnoticed. Suddenly, it accelerated and moved from directly overhead to below the horizon in about 5 seconds. Story 19. Faceless people. Once, I was standing under the light outside my grandparents' garage. When I asked my grandfather to look, there was nobody there, and he said he had not seen anyone. A second time, I was kept out of my grandparents' living room. When I accidentally walked in, a faceless figure was lying on the sofa bed. Later, when I asked about being kept out of the room, my grandmother denied it had happened. These memories remain vivid from my childhood. I have no explanation. Story 20. Driving down the freeway that passed through a major military base, about a mile ahead, a huge bolt of electricity, which I presumed was lightning, struck a tree about 25 yards off the road. As we approached, there were several white econovans, people in white coats, and instrumentation and other equipment on a table. The tree was not on fire. When we got home, we researched it thoroughly and found nothing. My friend and I still agree on what we saw. There is no record of any incident in the area. Story 21. A white rainbow at night in the middle of a field. Story 22. Driving on a semi-rural road south of Salem, Oregon, approximately 15 years ago, I swear I saw a cryptid-looking, bipedal, wolf-like creature. My girlfriend was with me and we both saw it. We did not really talk about it. We just kind of accepted that we had seen something we could not explain. Story 23. A colossal earthworm. It must have been 4 inches in diameter. I was a child walking onto my front lawn. I panicked and stomped the ground to scare it away, and it worked. I have regretted it ever since because I have no proof of this giant creature in my yard. Story 24. My best friend died almost a decade ago now. Fuck, I miss her. Without knowing it, I cooked her last dinner and said my last goodbye. I went home to get some sleep. At 2:01 a.m., I felt something wake me. I opened my eyes and, for just a few seconds, I saw a gray, one-dimensional, blob-like shadow moving across the ceiling. The shadow did not make sense given the angles of the windows and the streetlights. 2 perpendicular beams crossed at the center of the ceiling. The shadow crossed the beams without following the vertical faces of the wood. It seemed to float through the air like smoke, but there was no smell and no candles in the room. Then it was gone. I tried to figure out what I had seen, and it took me a while to fall back asleep. The next morning, I got the call that my best friend had died at 1:35 a.m. 26 minutes before something woke me at 2:01 a.m. To this day, I am convinced I saw her soul floating above me, somehow saying goodbye. I have no idea if I am correct, but that is how I feel. I am not a religious person. I believe in science, but I cannot ignore that night's experience. I believe science will figure it out one day. I miss you. I think about you every day. Story 25. I saw a cougar walking along the side of the road on my way home from my girlfriend's house outside of town at about 3 a.m. Story 26. A possessed house, or so people said. I worked for the local utilities reading water meters while I was in school. The house was very old and had been used as a makeshift hospital during the Civil War. The meter was all the way in the back. They had apparently redone the basement, so there were new concrete walls, but the original stone foundation remained. Felt like a maze. I went in to read the meter, took a wrong turn, and got lost and panicked. There were only a handful of walls because they wanted a game room and a bar. I calmed down, found the meter, followed the walls, and after a couple of minutes found the exit. The man I was with asked what happened. I told him I got lost, but it was not a big deal. He asked how I got lost. I said the new walls. He asked what walls. I looked back inside and there were no walls, just a dark, large basement. Apparently I had been in there for about an hour. He had come back in after catching up to get his lighter, never saw me, walked back out, and kept reading meters for an hour before he saw me coming out. He assumed I had gone upstairs and was talking to the owner, and that he would catch me at the end of the street. I know I saw walls and I know I got lost, and it certainly was not an hour. Note: the house was being remodeled in the early 1990s and the owner sold it a few years later when he went bankrupt. It has changed hands several times, according to people I know who still live in the area. It is finally receiving attention to be remodeled. It belonged to a surgeon who bought it from a reverend who was rumored to be involved in dark practices. According to newspaper clippings, the basement was used as a makeshift morgue and the rooms upstairs served as operating rooms during the Civil War. Story 27. A monkey wearing a football helmet drove a Volvo wagon through my uncle's neighborhood at night in 1995. I was 6 and I know what I saw. Story 28. I was hiking the Appalachian Trail and setting up in one of the metal roof shelters. I was about 5 miles from Hot Springs, North Carolina, and wanted to spend the day there and get a hot meal, etc. While doing a safety circle check, I saw something in the trees. It was a figure just sitting up there. I pointed my flashlight at it. It had gray, curled, clawed hands and feet and shiny eyes. I blinked and it flung itself down the trunk and across the underbrush in 3 seconds at most. I knew I was exhausted, but I did not think I could have hallucinated sounds, smells, and motion. I could still see its eyes. Story 29. I saw a 3-eared rabbit, and I have photos. People still do not believe me and think they are fake. Story 30. A huge manta ray jumped clear out of the water. I saw it from my car as I drove over the causeway from Tampa to Clearwater. Story 31. My neighbor was having a conversation with her cat. The strange part was that I heard the cat reply to her. Once they saw me, they stopped and stared at me. I left and heard them whispering. Now I can't help but greet that cat when I see it walking around my neighborhood. Story 32. Thundersnow. In college, we had team workouts at 5:30 a.m. During the winter, when we emerged from our dorms, we were greeted by an incredible lightning display combined with driving snow. The walk across campus felt like something from the day after tomorrow. When we finished the workout around 7 a.m., it had warmed up, changed to rain, and everything had melted. There were 25 guys on the roster. We all know what we saw, but none of our friends believed us. Story 33. I had an unexplained moment when I was a child. I was playing a soccer game and was behind everyone. Suddenly my vision spun, and I found myself in front of the goal with the soccer ball at my feet. I did not feel sick. I took the shot and scored. Story 34. A shadow person. I saw someone in my kitchen late at night who I thought was my father, standing by the stove. It was dark and I jumped when I saw his silhouette. I asked what he was doing in the kitchen in the middle of the night. He stood without moving. I told him it was not funny. It was terrifying. I turned on the light. I was alone. No one was there, just me shaking with fear. I could not see details, only a human shape. I spoke to it. Nobody will ever believe I saw that. I know what happened that night. I spoke to it for about 30 seconds. It stood 6 feet from me. Postscript. Maybe I am crazy. When I think about it, it is easier to convince myself I hallucinated, had a psychotic episode, or was seeing things instead of what really happened. I was not sleeping. It was late, but I was on my computer in my room eating a snack. I went to wash my plate in the kitchen and saw someone standing at the stove. He was blocking the clock on the stove. I could see the shape because of the green glow of the clock. It was the only light in the kitchen. Story 35. I have 2 experiences that happened while I stayed at my mother's house in the woods, about half a mile off the main road. These events occurred in the mid to late 90s. First, when I was about 15, I was lying in bed asleep. In the middle of the night, the whole outside was lit up with bright lights. The glow woke me as it shone in my windows and then quickly faded. It was not a beam of light, but more like someone switching on stadium lights for a minute or so. Second, on another day at my mother's house, around 7:30 to 8 in the morning, I was walking between the living room and the kitchen when I heard angelic voices harmonizing above. It lasted 10 to 15 seconds. I have never heard anything like it before or since. My mother has many angel figurines on display, but the sound did not come from them. I do not think any of them play music, and what I heard was surreal and not a recording. Story 36. Ghosts on the Gettysburg Battlefield. For the longest time, I chalked it up to reenactors and a vivid imagination. Several years later, I returned to the park and visited a bookstore, where I overheard another customer telling the clerk the exact same story I had witnessed, down to some very specific details. Story 37. I used to be able to consciously levitate in my very vivid dreams. In my dreams, the power to fly would wane and return. It required intense concentration to stay airborne. Felt like a super vivid, amazing reality that I loved. I knew I was dreaming but could control my flight. When I was 16 years old, I was especially buoyant and decided to fly around my old neighborhood. I remembered the flight path and a roof I did not expect to be blue. I later went to the house to check, and the roof was not blue. I was disappointed that it had been only a dream. I did not actually leave my body, though it felt like I did. The flying dreams stopped eventually. 8 years later, I was on a Forest Service helitack crew and dispatched to a lightning strike in my neighborhood. As we flew over the area, I went into shock as the pilot followed the exact same flight path as my dream. I predicted the turns in the air, and as I looked down, the roof was blue. Story 38. I was living in a shared house with 2 roommates. They were Chinese international students and very serious people. One night, as I was walking from my bedroom to the bathroom, I saw my roommate sitting upright on the couch. It shocked me, so I said, "Oops, sorry," then continued to the toilet and quietly returned to my room. I assumed he had fallen asleep watching a show. The next morning I asked him if he had slept all right on the couch, and both roommates told me they had not been home the previous night. I am not a believer in the supernatural, but it was either a ghost or an intruder, and I chose to believe it was a ghost. Story 39. I saw an ivory-billed woodpecker in 1970, years after its supposed extinction date. I was in a small North Florida town built along a swampy river basin where true believers still hope to find a remnant population. It was huge, about the size of our chickens, with folded wings white on the trailing edges and an ivory-colored bill. I know that, as of the early 1970s, there was at least one ivory-billed woodpecker in that area, but none of the ornithologists who were so eager to search in Arkansas were interested in that region. Story 40. I went to Disney when I was 5. I remember seeing a kid harass Captain Hook, and Captain Hook grabbed one of the kid's shoes and threw it into a pond or fountain. Story 41. When I was a child, I saw the ghost of a toddler in the dining room. I did not say anything until a month later, when my brother told me he had seen a child there. My childhood home was built in 1772. Story 42. I live in Kentucky. 5 years ago, I saw an armadillo on the side of the road, but no one believed me. When the news reported that armadillos have reached the state, I felt vindicated. Story 43. My dad was holding my 3-year-old son. They were happy, standing in the back, listening to music my son liked. It was simple and pleasant, not odd in itself. My dad had been a good grandfather and my son was very snuggly. The strange thing was that both of them were already dead and buried at the time, and I knew that. I still saw it. Story 44. I talked to my dead mother on the phone 3 weeks after she died. My mother passed away in January 2021. I flew from Florida to Kansas City for the funeral with my husband and daughter. We attended the services, closed out her estate, and returned home. About 3 weeks later, I was lying in bed when my phone rang. I had been debating getting out of bed or just lying there feeling sorry for myself, but I was wide awake. I sat up to look at my phone. I did not remember what the caller ID showed, but I answered. My mother had a very distinctive way of answering the phone when she called. She said, "Well, hi there," then chuckled and asked, "Did I wake you up?" That was exactly what she said. I sat there holding the phone for a minute and then said, "Mom?" There was a click, like a phone turning off, and everything felt like it reset. I had attended her funeral and seen her in the casket. Her phone was not in the possession of my brother, my aunt, or my mother's boyfriend, the 3 people closest to her who would have received the phone. None of them would have played a joke like that. I am not sure where her phone went after she passed. Story 45. A mountain lion stands in tall grass beside a local highway in a suburban area of Kansas. Story 46. My friend was running through the air. I was young. We were playing in a field. My brother had been told to tell us to go home. As we ran home, a strong wind came up. I looked at my friend. He was running as fast as he could, about 2 feet off the ground. He probably weighed about 30 pounds, if that. They both said it was a tornado, but I never saw one. Years later, I ran into him. Unfortunately, he developed a mental disorder whose name I could not remember. I was laughing out loud when I brought up the event. He was shocked and said, "You mean that really happened? It is sad to have to question what did and did not happen to you." He was happy to tell his family that it really did happen, whether they believed him or not. A note to Alan, yes, it happened. Story 47. I made some friends while working in retail who enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings, and I went with them once. It was a massive industrial complex that was left to rot in the 1980s after the work dried up in that sector. I got separated from the group in an upper part of the building and could barely see a thing. They had insisted we go at night. I tried a few light switches and one turned on a lamp with a red shaded bulb, which I found strange. Even stranger, there were several men standing in the room with me whom I could not see until the light came on. At least 3, maybe more, standing next to each other wearing strange clothes. One of them held a rifle in his hands. Not a hunting rifle, but a military specification type. And another stared into my soul with huge blue eyes. He said nothing, placed his finger over his lips as if to shush me, then waved his hand to shoo me away. I literally fell down the stairs trying to get away and found my friends a few hallways away. I told them we were not alone and that we had to leave. They saw the fear in my eyes and believed me. On the drive home, I told them what I had seen, though I was a stammering mess, and they were flabbergasted. I told no one and cut off contact with those friends. Some nights I wonder about their identities and their purpose in that building. Story 48. Pulling into my parents' neighborhood one night, I saw 2 huge, bright yellow eyes reflecting in the darkness of a neighbor's yard. I could not believe it. A wolf-like creature with a very long, bushy tail, at least 1.5 times the size of a large gray wolf. It had unusually long ears, a shorter, stubbier-looking face, and very long legs. As I rounded the corner, it ran into the nearby woods. I had never seen anything like it, and nobody believes me. Story 49. I was a kid at a meeting in the Friends meeting house. Everyone was meditating. I felt totally relaxed. I saw a halo of light, like energy, emanating around the head of someone about 15 feet from me. Story 50. A lightning strike occurred about a foot away from me. No one believed me. Story 51. I saw ghosts while in Gettysburg. I also saw a ghost walking down the stairs in our 19th century home in Kentucky. It was a woman in a white lace dress. Story 52. I swear in Pokemon Red, one time I used Splash and it actually did a single point of damage. Story 53. When I was a kid, I swear to God I saw a giant bee. It was the size of a large parrot, flapping its large transparent wings on a rock in my parents' backyard. I was with another child, and he was nonplussed. Yeah, it's a big bee. Big deal, he told my mom, while I stood in shock, unable to articulate that I was seeing a cryptid living among us. It was the strangest thing I have ever witnessed. To this day, I have no idea what it was. Story 54. Okay, I know how cliché and fake this sounds, but just bear with me. My parents bought a very large but old and decrepit New England home. I was running around it relatively alone when I was barely elementary school age. I was running up the stairs. At the top, the stairs take a 90-degree turn onto the floor. I remember reaching the fourth or so step from the top, grabbing the top railing, and swinging around to the floor only to see something. It looked like a wide human leg made of wood, but where the knee should be was a deep, socketed face. The entire thing looked like it was melting, like E.T., the extraterrestrial covered in mud. I remember freezing and looking up to lock eyes with it. Then it started moaning, a warped with sound that suggested both pain and pleasure. I ran out of there and hid in the family car. I'm not saying I saw something supernatural. I have always had a very overactive imagination. As a child, I often saw faces in clusters of leaves on branches. That said, I remember seeing something so clear that it was there 1 second and gone the next. I swear I can still hear it moaning and screaming, even as I write this. Story 55. A fruit of the Loom logo featuring a cornucopia from 1994. Story 56. There was a huge black tarantula on the plane by my feet. It had a large abdomen. It ran away and no one saw it again. I told the man next to me, but he looked at me as if I were a weirdo. I told the flight attendant as I left the plane. There was no proof. Story 57. Agapogo is Canada's Loch Ness Monster. In 1982, my dad stopped at the sign by the lake where it was said to be. He took our picture, then ordered us back into the car. I leaned over the guardrail and saw 2 humps in the water, moving toward shore. I tried to make my family look, but my dad yelled at me to get back in the car. Story 58. I swear my boyfriend and I went through a time warp. We were walking through our local park on forest trails, and I knew the next turn led to where my car was parked. We have been to this park more than 20 times, so I knew the way. I thought I had been looking for the exit a little too long, so I turned around and it was behind me on the only path I could have come from. We both experienced it, so I know I am not crazy. Story 59. It was Wednesday, November 21st, 1984. My family of 4 was in our car on our way to visit relatives for Thanksgiving. My father was driving, my mother rode in the passenger seat, and my brother and I sat in the back seat, I on the left and he on the right. It was just about dusk, and we were northbound on Highway 259, north of Interstate 30 and south of Dalby Springs, Texas. In that area, the 2-lane Highway 259 passes through the lowland floodplain of the Sulphur River. The setting sun shone through the trees. My father shouted, "Look," and pointed into the thicket on the left, the west side of the car. We saw a very hairy creature moving fast on 2 feet, standing upright toward the northwest, away from the road. His hair was very dark brown and appeared coarse and thick. It was 20 feet off the road when we first saw it, so perhaps 35 to 50 feet from our car, given the southbound lane was between our car and the brush and woods. My father and I saw it best. My brother caught a glimpse, but my mother missed it. My father immediately stopped the car, but by the time he did, it was gone. We believe what we saw was the Fouke monster, also known as the Boggy Creek monster. Story 60. Maybe 12 years ago, I saw something huge come out of the sky and go into the river I was driving alongside. My son and I were sitting in silence. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and before I could say anything, my son yelled, "What the fuck was that?" So he saw it too. 2 summers ago, I watched a triangular craft cross the entire visible horizon from north to south in under 10 seconds. It went right over my house. It was solid black with 3 lights at the corners. It did not make a sound. About 10 years ago, I was moving out of a house. It was the last night there. I was standing at the toilet urinating, and the medicine cabinet mirror faced into the shower behind me. I looked into the mirror and saw a shadowy mass as tall as I was walk right behind me. My stream had just ended. I zipped up and left the room as all the shampoo and conditioner bottles were knocked off the tub. Story 61. Not so much saw as experienced. I hit a racquetball so that it phased through a wall and possibly entered another dimension. I was bored, waiting for my dad to finish work one weekend. He gave me his racquetball racket and a ball and let me into the court. I was about 16 at the time. I had no idea how to play, and it turns out it takes skill to hit the ball multiple times off the back wall, and I was not that into it. So I decided to see how many walls I could bounce it off with my strongest hit. I wound up and slammed the ball as hard as I could. I totally overcommit and was facing the floor when I finished my swing. I am pretty sure I heard it hit 2 walls. And then nothing. I was in a white cube of a room. There was a door with a small glass window and a vent in the ceiling with a grate over it. There was me with a racket in my hand, but no racquetball anywhere to be found. Since then, I have been convinced there is another dimension just below our own where lost items can accidentally end up when they slip past the boundaries of this one. It is filled with lost socks, keys, nail clippers, 10mm sockets, and my dad's racquetball. Story 62. Thousands of diamondback rattlesnakes were covering the road as I left Douglas, Arizona. It was around 1 in the morning after a heavy thunderstorm earlier that evening. The snakes ranged from large, thick adults to small juveniles. After that, I stopped stepping between trailers to relieve myself. Unfortunately, this was long before good phone cameras. Story 63. 50 years ago, I lived in Lightning Ridge, Australia. That is a very hot, dry place, but once a year it has a monsoon season similar to India. One year we had a super monsoon and an inland sea formed. I called it that then. It was really a giant lake. You could just barely see the other shore, but it was so long you could not see the ends. It was about 20 or 30 kilometers outside of town. My father took me to see it. To my surprise, bright green grass was everywhere, with little clumps of flowers. The most amazing part was the wildlife. There were frogs, insects, and goannas everywhere. The goannas had changed. I had seen striped white, black, and gray ones before, but now they were all colored green, yellow, red, blue, and more. They were as brightly colored as butterflies and were patterned and multicolored too. I wondered if these were mostly newly born animals, with the species having an alternative set of genes for good times when color is more useful. Over the next few years, the sea dried up and disappeared again, and the animals, especially the lizards, returned to plain, drab colors with a few exceptions for stripes. Of course, there was no grass or flowers, just dirt again. Story 64. I remember when I was a kid, I lived in a block of flats and saw a fighter plane go into a tailspin. Flames clearly visible at the rear, and crash. Felt so real. More than 20 years later, I distinctly remember several planes flying at very low altitude above the 3-story flats. One plane was being refueled midair. I had never seen that before, and years later when I researched it I found the same images. I cannot explain why these memories are so vivid. At that altitude it would have been very loud. I'm sure it happened, and it still drives me crazy. Story 65. A perfect heart-shaped cloud appeared. It was incredible. My daughter was with me, but no one believes us. Story 66. I drove through a town that did not exist. It was a small town of maybe 500 people on Highway 412 just east of Gladstone, New Mexico. If you look at a map, there is nothing there and never was. But I saw it. It had a grocery store, a Dairy Queen, an H&R Block office, some houses, and a gas station. There were people walking around. I did not think anything of it until I realized I had a strange gut feeling. It was like I could not breathe and no one could see me, as if I had disappeared. I felt dread, and there were no other cars on the road but mine. When I passed through the town, it all went away like a switch flipped. I could not find it on a map, and no one knew what I was talking about. Today, I still wonder if my mind was just playing tricks on me. Story 67. I live in South Alabama. On a drive late at night to my parents' house in rural Mississippi on back roads, I saw what is colloquially known as a black panther. I know these are melanistic jaguars or leopards, and neither exists in the United States anymore, but panthers are also called cougars, pumas, mountain lions, and bobcats, and those still live in the United States, though not in South Alabama. I know what I saw. I have a bachelor's degree in biology. This was not a house cat, dog, or any other domestic animal. It was, as best I can describe it, a black panther. I submitted too quickly. The animal was stalking in the high grass at the side of the road. Because this was a back road with many curves and no lighting, I was only going about 30 miles per hour when I first saw it in the grass. I slowed down and watched as it slinked through the grass until it reached a clearing. I saw it plainly. Story 68. I was about 9 or 10 years old and at summer camp with a friend. We were up in the mountains and had gone off exploring. We ran across someone dressed in a full red ninja outfit running down a valley. We followed him for a while until he noticed us. He pulled out his nunchucks, spun them for a bit, and then ran off. I snapped the worst photo using one of those old, brick-shaped plastic film cameras. I still have the photo. It is completely worn and faded, and the shot was from so far away it might as well have been Bigfoot. I've told the story many times to my friends, and they laugh every time. Story 69. So one night, driving in South Florida, I saw a strange-looking animal crossing the street and heading into a park. By the time I got my phone out to take a picture, it was gone. I tried to figure out what it was, and after a photo lineup, I concluded it was a sloth. I told everyone, but no one believed me. About a year later, I was at a city council meeting where someone from the parks department was present. I started telling her my story and describing what I saw, and before I could say what I thought it was, she looked at me and said, "Oh, you saw the sloth?" Story 70. It was not something I saw so much as experienced. I was 9, doing yoga with my mother. She was into it and I was copying her. We were meditating, and for a brief period I saw the whole universe, or felt like I was the whole universe. It is really hard to explain, and I have never had that since. Since then, I have read that this is typical of how people around the world describe mystical experiences. Story 71. I was so close to the unidentified flying object that if it had windows I could have looked inside. To perform tricks for me. The most frustrating thing is I cannot be upset with people for not believing me. That is the rational response. I am left with knowledge I cannot do anything with. Story 72. In 2003, we had been drinking and decided to pile into 2 cars to go to a taco place a couple of miles away. The 2 drivers decided to race. We were going about 80 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. As we reached the train tracks, my car and the other car were side by side, and we saw an incredibly ethereal train. It missed the other car by just a foot or two. No warning signal, no gate, just this almost glowing train, silent. It was a clear night. We rarely get fog in Las Vegas. Everyone in the car exclaimed that we had almost died, and both cars stopped racing. We pulled up to the taco place, and everyone in the other car had seen it too. For 2 carloads of people to have witnessed the same thing, agree about exactly what we saw, and all be so shaken was unusual. We ate quietly and drove home at normal speed, checking whether a train was stopped at the tracks. There was nothing. We have called it the ghost train ever since. Story 73. An albino bat in the fun and games parking lot scared the hell out of me. Story 74. I saw a 6-foot ghost of a very skinny, tall man with long hair wearing a butcher's outfit covered in blood when I was a kid. In that house, I often heard voices calling my name in the afternoon. I would go to the living room, and it turned out that nobody had called me. I thought these events were normal until, when I was older, I realized they did not sound right. Story 75. A werewolf. This was about 8 or 9 years ago. I had just gotten off work at 2 a.m. and was driving home on a clear night with no fog or rain. As I came around a curve on the highway, my headlights lit up something that was eating a deer that had been hit. My headlights only lit it for about 5 seconds, so I did not really process it until 5 minutes later. If it was a dog, it was the largest dog I have ever seen, black and wild looking. It was not a bobcat or a mountain lion. We have those here. The only similar thing is the urban myth in Missouri about panthers. What has stuck with me the most is that it was not really on all four legs, but more hunched over on two legs while eating. I sound crazy even writing this, but it has stuck with me all these years. Story 76. My parents built their house in the early 1980s. My father and his best friend designed it and the friend built it. In the early 2000s, my mother died in that house. For 20 years, the oven clock did not work even though the timer and the oven did. The day after my mother died, the clock began working and continued for several weeks. Light bulbs around the house burned out quickly during that time, sometimes immediately after being replaced. Then the clock stopped working again and the bulbs stopped burning out so quickly. A few years later, my father redesigned the kitchen with his best friend. When they pulled out the oven, they discovered the clock module had never been plugged in, which explains why it usually did not work. Yet for a few weeks it had run with no known electrical connection. Story 77. Bigfoot in Ohio in 1976. I was playing hide and seek with a friend, and I thought I saw him running through the woods. I quickly realized the figure I saw was far too tall to be my friend and was moving too fast. I ran toward it as fast as I could. I was about 40 feet away when it jumped the canal and went over the bank on the other side. It disappeared over the bank and was gone. The canal was mostly dried up and was nothing but mud. I saw a single footprint near the bank on my side, about 1.5 feet long. There were no other prints in the mud. It had completely cleared the canal and landed on the other bank. The canal was approximately 25 feet across. I knew what I saw, but I did not believe it because I had never heard of Bigfoot sightings in Ohio. Update. This was long before the internet, so I never bothered to look it up. It turns out there are actually a lot of Bigfoot sightings in Ohio. Update 2. My friend had actually been hiding in the doghouse in my backyard. Story 78. An unidentified flying object appeared very large and close. If you looked directly at it, you could not see it, but if you looked slightly in front of or behind it, you could. It was like looking at a faint star that becomes visible from the side. It moved slowly, cruising by, and you could see the stars through it. The sky was bright with the moon out, and nights in Arizona are incredibly clear. It was similar to the Phoenix lights, except there were no lights and it was about 2,500 feet away. Story 79. When I was a child, a ghostly man stood in my bedroom. My sister and I both saw him and screamed at the same time. We described him exactly the same. Our father rushed up the stairs and told us to go to bed. Terrified, we slept in the same bed that night with the sheets over our heads. I still swear it was real. Story 80. Telepathy. My mom once claimed she could read minds and I called it nonsense. She proceeded to correctly guess every color I was thinking of with about 80% accuracy. Then we moved on to numbers and words, all well above chance, including novel words she did not know. She sounded them out by syllable. To this day she denies it, who knows why, and I have never been able to replicate the result with anyone else. I am a scientist and not much into woo-woo, so I am not talking about anything metaphysical. I am sure there is an explanation, but I know telepathy is real. We simply lack sufficient reproducibility and scientific evidence to substantiate it. I remain confident it will be understood someday. Story 81. I saw what I believe was Sasquatch while hiking with my family in the mountains. Could have been a large, hairy man also hiking, but I firmly believe it was Bigfoot. Story 82. During a facility transfer from a state-operated psychiatric facility to the hospital, I was reading through the patient's medical records. A line on the second page caught my attention. The court ordered the patient to be admitted after acting on cannibalistic ideations. Story 83. I went on a deep camping trip in Wisconsin. We portaged 3 times and rowed across lakes. It was rough. I was about 16 years old and just tagging along with 2 other men my dad worked with. One of them smelled so bad from body odor. Late at night, I woke up to go pee. I stepped out of my tent and saw something brighter than the North Star. I stared at it, puzzled. Then it went dim, jumped once in a triangular pattern, and gradually changed its light, moving faster than anything on Earth can move. I drank some schnapps I had sneaked in and went back to bed. We did some fishing and stopped at Hardee's on the way home. It was a good time with my old man. Between you and me, that thing in the sky was weird. Story 84. A ship-like object in the sky disappeared into a vortex. It looked as if it slipped under a blanket. It vanished while I was driving for work late one night in Florida. Story 85. 2 good friends witnessed a Diablero driving through the wooded rural part of town. They said its back hackles were at the same height as the hood of the 1976 Chevy Cheyenne pickup truck they were both driving, likely pretty high. The wolf-like creature had a mature deer in its jaws as it scurried across the road in front of them that night. Years later, I brought it up laughing, and one of them insisted the animal was not dragging the deer but moving at full gait with the deer bouncing in its mouth. I had to paraphrase that comment because this happened more than 20 years ago. They are certain of what they saw. Story 86. I saw unidentified flying objects while stargazing in the Boy Scouts. 2 of us were looking at a pair of stars when one flashed brightly and moved off in one direction, slowly at first, then suddenly accelerated and zoomed away. After it had gone, the second did the same and went in another direction. They were not meteors. Both had been stationary initially. Story 87. My family was driving up to Mammoth, California in the late 1980s. It was daylight and everyone was sleeping except my father and me. The Owens Valley and the Sierra Nevada are breathtaking. I knew that even as a child. Far off along the mountain range, a jet flew in fast. I saw a patch on the mountainside quiver and flash, and the jet disappeared into the mountain. Then everything looked normal again. I looked at my father. He was wide-eyed and kept asking whether I had seen it too. I believe we saw a secret military base. When everyone woke, they assumed we were telling a story, but I know it was true. The memory is vivid, and my father saw it too. Story 88. A stealthy cat meticulously organizes socks by color in my drawer at 3 in the morning. Story 89. I noticed the presence of what I believe was an angel at my husband's deathbed. I know some people will think it was suspicious or just grief, and maybe that is true, but it was the most beautiful and peaceful moment possible. A deep calm washed over both of us. He turned his face to me and said, "I think I'm going to be okay," and he passed immediately. I know the dying brain releases chemicals that can create a euphoric effect, but I felt it too. Story 90. A Yes birth control commercial used Scandal's peppy, upbeat debut song Goodbye to You. I saw it once, back in 2008, and I have never been able to find it since. The juxtaposition was hilariously twisted and dark, and I want to share it with the world. Story 91. After my father-in-law died, my wife and I were sitting in our bedroom about a week later. Our cat started hissing at nothing in particular. She had never hissed at anything. She was the sweetest little calico and loved everyone. Not that night. She was upset, raised, hissing and angry. I looked over and saw what looked like a haze in the room, not like smoke but more like a light mist. My wife also turned and looked, but neither of us said anything. We tried to settle the cat down. I did not think much of it at the time other than wondering why she was so upset. A few nights later she said, "So did you see?" And I replied, "Your father's hazy ghost in our bedroom? Yeah, I think so. I do not believe in ghosts. It's nonsense." Still, something was in the room that night, and the cat did not like it at all. Story 92. I saw a colorful, spinning parrot wing materialize out of thin air for an instant while I was at a metaphysical bookstore. It was an afterimage like those produced by old flash cubes, but clear as day. The bookstore owners looked unimpressed when I told them what I had seen and said, "Oh, that is just the store ghost saying hello. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video." Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.